While I was in the hospital, my wife emptied our bank account. As I lay unconscious in the hospital, fighting for my life, my wife drained our bank account. The message she sent was brutal. The text she sent was cruel and heartless. I deserve this after everything I've done for you. You deserve this for everything I've had to put up with. I stared at that text for a long moment, my heart monitor beeping steadily in the background. I just sat there, looking at that message, with the beeping of the heart monitor as the only sound in the room. Then I replied with a single thumbs up emoji. All I said back was a single thumbs up emoji. What she didn't know was that her greed had just handed me the perfect weapon for my revenge. Her greedy act had, without her knowledge, given me the perfect tool for my retaliation. My name is Cameron Mitchell, 45 years old, and I'd spent 22 years behind the wheel of a semi-truck. I'm Cameron Mitchell, 45 years old, and for the past 22 years, I've been a truck driver. Not glamorous work, but it paid well. It wasn't a fancy job, but it was a good living. Well enough to keep my wife, Dana, in the comfortable lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to but never appreciated. It was enough money to provide my wife, Dana, with a life of comfort that she'd come to expect but never truly valued. The chest pains had been getting worse for weeks. For several weeks, I had been experiencing worsening chest pains. I kept telling myself it was just stress, just the long hours and endless cups of gas station coffee until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I kept telling myself it was only stress, long hours, and too much coffee until I could no longer ignore the symptoms. Somewhere outside Omaha, the pain hit me like a freight train. I was on the road outside Omaha when a sharp pain hit me like a train. I had to pull over, called 911 myself, gasping into the phone. The pain forced me to pull over. I could barely gasp out my location as I called 911. They airlifted me to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I was flown by helicopter to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Turns out it wasn't a panic attack. It was not a panic attack, as it turned out. My heart was literally shutting down. My heart was actually failing. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the doctor's face, grim and focused. Before I lost consciousness, the last thing I saw was the doctor's grim and focused face. "We're losing him," she said to someone behind her. "He's not going to make it," I overheard the doctor say to someone. I woke up with tubes in my arms and a stent in my heart. When I regained consciousness, my arms were connected to tubes, and I had a stent in my heart. The nurse told me I had flatlined twice. The nurse informed me that my heart had stopped twice. "You're lucky to be alive," she said with a smile. "You're fortunate to have survived," she said, giving me a smile. I didn't feel lucky when I checked my phone and saw only one message from Dana. When I checked my phone and saw a single message from Dana, I didn't feel lucky. 15 years of marriage, and this was her response to me nearly dying. After 15 years of marriage, this was how she reacted to me almost dying. The screenshot showed our joint account balance, $0. She sent a screenshot of our shared bank account, showing a balance of $0. Below it, her cold message. Her cold message was underneath the screenshot. $61,438.72 gone. The amount she took was $61,438.72. My emergency fund, my truck maintenance savings, my retirement cushion, everything I'd worked my ass off to build vanished while I was unconscious. My emergency money, my truck savings, my retirement nest egg, all of it was gone, wiped out while I was in a coma. I should have felt rage. I should have been furious. Instead, I felt something far more dangerous, clarity. But instead, I felt something far more significant, a moment of clarity. When the doctor came in and told me I needed 6 weeks of recovery, no driving, no stress, he asked if someone was picking me up. The doctor came in and told me I needed 6 weeks to recover, with no driving or stress, then asked if anyone was coming to pick me up. Yeah, I lied smoothly. Yes, I lied easily. That night, I made a call to my brother Jeff. I called my brother Jeff that night. We hadn't spoken in months, not from any fight, just different lives pulling us in different directions. We hadn't talked in months, not because we had a fight, but because our lives had gone in different directions. Need a favor? I said when he answered. When he picked up, I asked, Can you do me a favor? Name it, he replied without hesitation. Anything, he said without a second thought. Need a place to crash for a few days, and I need you not to tell Dana. I need a place to stay for a couple of days, and I need you to keep it a secret from Dana. There was a pause. She doesn't know you're alive? He paused before asking. She doesn't know you survived? Oh, she knows, I said, staring at that devastating text message. She's aware I'm alive, I said, looking at her hurtful text message. She just doesn't know I'm not coming home. She just doesn't know that I'm never returning home. I'd met Dana at a gas station outside Cheyenne 7 years ago. I met Dana 7 years ago at a gas station outside Cheyenne. She was stranded with a flat tire, and I was the guy who stopped to help. She had a flat tire, and I was the one who stopped to help. Back then, she looked at me like I was some kind of hero for knowing how to use a jack. At the time, she looked at me like a hero because I knew how to change a tire. Funny how the things that impress people at first just become expected later. It's funny how things that seem impressive at first later become things people take for granted. We got married 6 months after that meeting, quick but not reckless. We got married 6 months later, which was fast, but it wasn't a rash decision. I was 30, she was 27, old enough to know better, young enough to believe in forever. I was 30, and she was 27, old enough to be cautious, but young enough to believe in a happily ever after. She never liked that I was gone 3 weeks out of every 4. She never liked that I was on the road 3 out of every 4 weeks. But she loved what the money bought. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, that big house we bought in the nice part of town. But she loved what the money provided. Designer clothes, fancy restaurants, and the large house we bought in a nice neighborhood. I'd call every night from whatever state I was passing through. I called her every night from whatever state I was passing through. Those conversations used to last hours. As the years went on, they got shorter, 5 minutes of updates, then just checking in. Our conversations used to go on for hours, but as time passed, they got shorter, 5-minute updates, and eventually just quick check-ins. The last couple of years, it was mostly texts. Made it to Nashville. All good here. For the last couple of years, most of our communication was through texts like, Just got to Nashville. Everything's fine. Looking back, there were signs I'd been too blind to see. In hindsight, there were signs that I was too blind to see. She stopped asking when I'd be home. She stopped asking me when I would be coming home. Started taking trips with friends I'd never met. She began traveling with friends I had never met. But I trusted her. I had faith in her. That's what marriage is supposed to be, right? Trust. That's what marriage is supposed to be, isn't it? Trust. However, they overlooked a crucial detail. I wasn't just some trucker they could take advantage of. They failed to consider one very important fact. I wasn't just a truck driver they could easily take advantage of. Jeff helped me into his guest room. Jeff assisted me in getting to his guest room. He's a construction foreman, works locally, divorced twice himself. He works as a construction foreman in town and has been divorced twice. He knows a thing or two about the ways people can disappoint you. He's familiar with how people can let you down. You should eat something, he said. You need to eat, he said. but I wasn't hungry. I didn't have an appetite. I was thinking about the house I'd bought, about the refinancing I'd done 3 months earlier when rates dropped. I was thinking about the house I bought and how I'd refinanced it 3 months earlier when interest rates dropped. Dana had claimed she was too busy to come to the signing, so I'd handled it myself. Dana said she was too busy to be there for the signing, so I took care of it on my own. Put it solely in my name, since my credit score was better. I put the house in my name since my credit was better. She never even asked to see the paperwork. She didn't even bother to ask to see the documents. There was also the medical power of attorney I'd set up last year after my buddy Tim had a stroke. Also, last year, after my friend Tim had a stroke, I set up a medical power of attorney. My niece Megan, Jeff's daughter, had helped me with it. My niece Megan, Jeff's daughter, who is a law student, helped me with it. She's a law student, smart as hell, made sure everything was airtight and legal. She's incredibly smart, and made sure everything was legally sound and secure. "Does Dana know you're here?" Jeff asked. "Does Dana know you're at my place?" Jeff asked. "No," I said. "And we're keeping it that way for now." "No," I said. "And we're going to keep it that way for now." "She took everything. She cleaned me out." I nodded, taking a bite of the sandwich he'd made me. It didn't taste like anything. I nodded and took a bite of the sandwich he made me, but I couldn't taste anything. "I'm going to get some rest." "Doctor's orders." "The doctor said I need to get some rest, so I'm going to do that." But that night, I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep at all that night. I stared at the ceiling, remembering all the little moments where Dana had seemed distant. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the times Dana had seemed distant. Checking her phone under the table at restaurants. She used to check her phone under the table at restaurants. Changing passwords. She'd change her passwords. Moving money between accounts for better interest rates. She moved money between accounts to get better interest rates. I'd been blind, but not anymore. I had been oblivious, but I wasn't anymore. On my 3rd day at Jeff's place, I got a text from our neighbor Harold. On the 3rd day I was staying at Jeff's, I got a text from my neighbor Harold. "Haven't seen you around. Everything okay? Dana's got some guy over. Thought you should know." The text read, "I haven't seen you around. Is everything okay? Dana has a guy over. I just thought you should know." I sat with that information for a long time, didn't respond, just let it sink in. I didn't respond. I just let the information sink in for a while. The pieces were falling into place. Everything was starting to make sense. Later that afternoon, I had Jeff drive me to the bank. Later that day, Jeff drove me to the bank. Not a regular branch where Dana and I were known, but the main office downtown. Not the branch where Dana and I were known, but the main downtown office. I asked to speak with a fraud specialist. I requested to speak with a fraud specialist. Showed them the text message with a screenshot, explained I'd been hospitalized and unconscious when the withdrawals happened without my knowledge or consent. I showed them the text message with a screenshot and explained that I had been unconscious in the hospital when the money was taken from our account without my permission. The woman behind the desk kept her face neutral, professional, but I could see it in her eyes, pity, maybe a little anger on my behalf. The woman's face remained neutral, but I could see sympathy and a bit of anger in her eyes. "Mr. Mitchell," she said carefully, "we can start a fraud investigation, but given that it's a joint account and your wife has equal access, it may be difficult to." "Mr. Mitchell," she said, "we can start a fraud investigation, but because it's a joint account and your wife has equal access, it may be difficult to." I cut in. "But I'd like to try anyway." I interrupted her. "I'd still like to try." She nodded, started typing. We'll need hospital records confirming your stay, particularly documentation of when you were unconscious or incapacitated. She nodded and began typing. We'll need hospital records to confirm your stay, specifically documents showing when you were unconscious or otherwise unable to act. Not a problem. I can get those. And you should know, if this becomes a criminal matter, the police will get involved. And if this becomes a criminal matter, the police will be involved. I looked her straight in the eye. I'm counting on it. I looked her directly in the eye and said, That's exactly what I want. Just then, I knew this was bigger than just the money. At that moment, I realized this was more than just about the money. This was about justice. This was about getting justice. On the way back to Jeff's, we stopped for gas. We stopped for gas on the way back to Jeff's place. Through the windshield, I watched a father with 2 kids buying ice cream from the convenience store. I looked through the windshield and saw a father with his 2 kids buying ice cream from the convenience store. Normal life going on all around me, while mine had imploded. All around me, life was going on as normal, but mine had fallen apart. But for the first time since the hospital, I felt something other than betrayal. But for the first time since I was in the hospital, I felt something other than betrayal. I felt determination. I felt determined. Back at Jeff's place, I made 3 crucial phone calls. When I got back to Jeff's place, I made 3 important phone calls. First, to my dispatcher, explaining I needed extended medical leave. The first call was to my dispatcher, to tell them I needed to take an extended medical leave. Second, to the credit union where I kept a small business account for my independent contracting jobs, an account Dana didn't even know existed. The second was to my credit union, where I had a small business account for my independent contracting work, an account Dana didn't know about. Third, to Blake Morrison, a lawyer friend of Jeff's. The third was to Blake Morrison, a lawyer who was a friend of Jeff's. I need to know where I stand, I told Blake, explaining the situation with the house, the accounts, everything. I need to know my legal options, I told Blake after explaining the situation with the house, the accounts, and everything else. Blake agreed to meet the next day. Blake agreed to meet with me the next day. After I hung up, I pulled out my laptop and logged into accounts Dana had never shown interest in. After the call, I took out my laptop and logged into the accounts that Dana had never cared about. Not because I was hiding anything, but because she never cared about the boring parts of our finances. I wasn't hiding anything from her, but she was never interested in the boring parts of our finances. Investment accounts, retirement funds, that business account at the credit union, all still intact. My investment and retirement accounts, along with the business account at the credit union, were still untouched. While I was doing that, another text came through from Dana. As I was doing that, another text from Dana came in. Where are you? Your truck isn't at the depot. Did they tell you I came by? Where are you? Your truck isn't at the depot. Did they tell you I stopped by? I didn't answer. I didn't reply. Cameron, this is ridiculous. You can't just disappear. We need to talk about this. The text read, Cameron, this is crazy. You can't just vanish. We need to talk. I put the phone down. Jeff looked over from the kitchen. I set my phone down. Jeff looked over from the kitchen. She reaching out? She's trying to contact you? Yeah. Yes. You going to respond? Are you going to answer her? I closed my laptop. Not yet. However, she had no idea what was coming next. I closed my laptop. Not yet. But she had no idea what was about to happen. That night, I took a walk around Jeff's neighborhood. That night, I went for a walk around Jeff's neighborhood. Clear night, stars visible even with the city lights. It was a clear night, and I could see the stars even with the city lights. For the first time since the hospital, my chest didn't hurt, not physically anyway. For the first time since I was in the hospital, my chest didn't hurt physically. I realized something during that walk. As I walked, I came to a realization. I wasn't angry anymore. I was no longer angry. I wasn't even hurt. I wasn't even hurt anymore. I was done. I was over it. And with that came crystal clear clarity about what I needed to do. And with that feeling came a clear understanding of what I had to do. Dana hadn't just taken my money. She'd given me my freedom and the motivation to fight back. Dana didn't just take my money. She gave me my freedom and the reason to fight back. A week after I was discharged, I finally went home. A week after I was released from the hospital, I finally went home. Middle of the day when I knew Dana would be at her office job. I went in the middle of the day because I knew Dana would be at work. I used my key, walked in like I'd just come back from another haul. I used my key and walked in as if I were just returning from another long trip. The house smelled different. The house had a different smell. Cologne that wasn't mine. It smelled of cologne that wasn't mine. Empty wine bottles in the recycling bin. There were empty wine bottles in the recycling bin. 2 wine glasses in the dishwasher. There were 2 wine glasses in the dishwasher. I packed some clothes, my important papers, and the small lockbox from the closet where I kept my birth certificate and passport. I packed some clothes, my important documents, and the small lockbox with my birth certificate and passport from the closet. As I was walking out, I noticed the framed photo from our wedding day was missing from the hallway table. As I was leaving, I noticed that our wedding photo was missing from the hallway table. She'd already started erasing our life together. She had already started to erase our life together. Back at Jeff's, I met with Blake. When I got back to Jeff's, I met with Blake. We sat at his kitchen table with papers spread between us like battle plans. We sat at his kitchen table, with papers spread out like military battle plans. "The house situation is very interesting," he said, reviewing the refinancing documents. "The house situation is quite interesting," he said, as he looked at the refinancing documents. "Since you refinanced solely in your name, and given your recent cardiac event, you have a strong case for sole possession. Since you refinanced it in your name and had a recent cardiac event, we have a strong case for you to be the sole owner." "What about the money she took? What about the money she took?" Blake frowned. "That's trickier. Joint accounts typically mean joint ownership, but—" He tapped his finger on the bank statements. "The fact that she cleared it out while you were medically incapacitated could constitute financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, especially since you have documentation that these were primarily your earnings." Blake frowned. "That's a bit more difficult. Joint accounts are usually seen as having joint ownership, but—" He tapped on the bank statements. "The fact that she drained the account while you were medically incapacitated could be considered financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, especially since you have proof that the money was mostly from your earnings." "And if I want a divorce?" "What if I want a divorce? South Dakota is an equitable distribution state. Given the circumstances, I think we can make a compelling case for an arrangement heavily in your favor. South Dakota is an equitable distribution state. With what we have, I think we can make a strong case for you to get most of the assets." He gathered the papers. "I'll draft some initial documents. In the meantime, don't contact her. Don't respond if she reaches out. Let her sweat." He put the papers together. "I'll get some documents started. For now, do not contact her or respond to her. Let her worry." The panic calls started the next day. She started calling me the next day. Dana showed up at Jeff's house while I was alone. Dana came to Jeff's house when I was alone. I heard her car pull up, but didn't look out the window. I heard her car pull up, but didn't look out the window. The doorbell rang 3 times before she started pounding on the door. The doorbell rang 3 times before she started pounding on the door. "I know you're in there, Cameron. Your truck is parked down the street. I know you're in there, Cameron. Your truck is parked on the street. Her voice was muffled but desperate. You can't just hide. We need to talk about this. Her voice was muffled and desperate. You can't just disappear on me. We need to talk about this. I sat perfectly still in the living room, watching her lose control. I just sat in the living room, watching her lose control. Eventually, the knocking stopped. The knocking eventually stopped. I thought she'd left until my phone buzzed with a long text. I thought she had left until I got a long text from her. I'm sorry about the money. I was angry. You've been distant for months. I thought you were cheating. I found out about the house refinancing and panicked. We can work this out. Please talk to me. The text read, I'm sorry about taking the money. I was angry because you've been so distant for months, and I thought you were cheating. When I found out about the house refinancing, I panicked. We can fix this. Please talk to me. It was the first time she'd ever accused me of cheating. It was the first time she had ever accused me of cheating. Projection, probably. She was probably just projecting. I turned the phone face down without replying. I turned my phone face down without responding. When her face changed from confident to desperate, I knew I had her exactly where I wanted her. The moment I saw her face change from confident to desperate, I knew I had her right where I wanted her. The next day, Blake called with news that made my blood run cold and my resolve burn hotter. Blake called me the next day with news that chilled me, but also made me more determined. Dana contacted me, he said. She's hired Patricia Wells as her attorney. Dana's lawyer has contacted me, he said. She hired Patricia Wells. Patricia Wells. Patricia Wells. One of the most aggressive divorce attorneys in the state, known for going after everything: houses, retirement accounts, future earnings. She was one of the state's most aggressive divorce attorneys, known for trying to get everything: houses, retirement funds, and future earnings. She was expensive, which meant Dana was serious about this fight. She was expensive, which told me that Dana was ready to fight. What does that mean for us? I asked. What does this mean for us? I asked. It means she's not playing around. Wells is already claiming that your abandonment after the hospitalization constitutes desertion. She's painting you as unstable, saying you disappeared without explanation and are refusing communication. It means she's serious. Wells is already arguing that your disappearance after the hospital was abandonment. She's portraying you as an unstable person who vanished without a word and refuses to communicate. I let out a long breath. So what now? I let out a long breath. So what do we do now? We get ahead of this. I'm filing for an emergency hearing regarding the funds she withdrew. Judge Harmon is presiding, and he takes a very dim view of taking advantage of medical situations. We have to beat them to it. I'm filing for an emergency hearing to address the money she took. Judge Harmon will be presiding, and he does not look kindly on people who take advantage of medical situations. After hanging up, I made another call to my niece Megan. After hanging up, I called my niece Megan. I needed her help with something specific, something that would turn this whole case on its head. I needed her help with something that would turn the entire case in our favor. But then, they overlooked one crucial detail about my family connections. But they failed to realize one key detail about my family connections. That evening, I drove past our house, my house. That evening, I drove by our house, my house. Dana's car was in the driveway alongside a black Audi I didn't recognize. Dana's car was in the driveway next to a black Audi I didn't know. I circled the block once, then headed back to Jeff's. I drove around the block once, then went back to Jeff's. In the driveway, I got a text from a number I didn't know. When I got to Jeff's driveway, I got a text from an unknown number. This is Patricia Wells. I represent Dana Mitchell. Any further surveillance of my client will be documented as harassment. All communication must go through proper legal channels. The text read, This is Patricia Wells. I'm Dana Mitchell's attorney. Any further surveillance of my client will be documented as harassment. All communication must be done through our lawyers. They were watching me. I was watching them. They were keeping an eye on me, and I was doing the same to them. The gloves were officially off. The fight was officially on. 2 weeks later, we had our day in court. Emergency hearing regarding the withdrawn funds. 2 weeks later, we were in court for the emergency hearing about the funds she withdrew. Dana was there with Patricia Wells, both in sharp power suits. Dana was there with Patricia Wells, both wearing sharp business suits. I wore the only good tie I owned, the one I kept in my truck for unexpected funerals, but I felt more confident than I'd felt in months. I wore the only nice tie I owned, the one I kept in my truck for unexpected funerals, but I felt more confident than I had in months. Judge Harmon was an older man with white hair and reading glasses. Judge Harmon was an older man with white hair and reading glasses. He reviewed the filings without expression, occasionally looking up at Dana, then at me. He read the documents without any expression, occasionally looking at Dana, then at me. Ms. Wells, he finally said, your client withdrew the entirety of joint accounts while Mr. Mitchell was hospitalized for a life-threatening cardiac event. Is that correct? Ms. Wells, he said, your client took all the money from a joint account while Mr. Mitchell was in the hospital having a life-threatening heart attack. Is that correct? Wells stood. Your Honor, my client had every right to access those joint funds. Furthermore, Mr. Mitchell had recently refinanced their marital home solely in his name without Mrs. Mitchell's knowledge, which we contend was the first act of financial deception. Wells stood up and said, Your Honor, my client had the right to access the funds in the joint account. Additionally, Mr. Mitchell recently refinanced their house in his name without Mrs. Mitchell's knowledge, which we believe was the first act of financial dishonesty. The judge removed his glasses. I'm not asking about the house right now, Counselor. I'm asking about the timing of the withdrawal. Was your client aware that Mr. Mitchell was in the hospital when she took the money? The judge took off his glasses. I'm not asking about the house right now, Counselor. I'm asking about the timing of the withdrawal. Did your client know Mr. Mitchell was in the hospital when she took the money? Dana leaned over and whispered something to Wells. Wells cleared her throat. Yes, Your Honor, but my client was under extreme emotional distress, believing her marriage was ending. She acted to protect herself financially. Dana leaned over and whispered something to Wells. Wells cleared her throat and said, Yes, Your Honor, but my client was experiencing extreme emotional distress and believed her marriage was ending. She took the money to protect herself financially. Judge Harmon put his glasses back on. While he was unconscious from a heart attack. Seems an unlikely time for Mr. Mitchell to end his marriage. Judge Harmon put his glasses back on. While he was unconscious from a heart attack. It seems unlikely that Mr. Mitchell would choose that time to end his marriage. He shuffled some papers. I'm ordering the funds frozen pending further proceedings. Neither party may access this money until ownership is determined in the divorce settlement. He shuffled some papers. I'm ordering the funds to be frozen until the divorce settlement is finalized. Neither of you can touch the money until ownership is determined. It wasn't a complete win, but it stopped Dana from spending any more of my money. It wasn't a total victory, but it prevented Dana from spending any more of my money. As we left the courtroom, Dana tried to approach me. Wells held her back, but not before Dana said, Cameron, please, there's so much you don't understand. As we were leaving the courtroom, Dana tried to get to me. Wells held her back, but not before Dana said, Cameron, please, there's a lot you don't understand. I walked past without looking at her. I walked past her without looking. The expression on her face when she realized she'd lost control was worth everything. The look on her face when she realized she no longer had any control was priceless. Outside, Blake was satisfied. This is just the beginning. Now we start discovery, the part where all the cards get laid on the table. Blake was pleased. This is just the start. Now we move into the discovery phase, where all the facts are brought out into the open. A week later, Blake called me to his office with a folder that would change everything. A week later, Blake called me into his office with a folder that contained information that would change everything. We've got something, he said, sliding it across the desk. We found something, he said, sliding the folder across the desk. Inside was a bank statement from an account I didn't recognize. Inside the folder was a bank statement from an account I had never seen before. Dana's name was on it. The balance, $127,340.56. The name on the account was Dana's, and the balance was $127,340.56. Where did this come from? I asked, though I was already putting the pieces together. Where did this money come from? I asked, even though I was already figuring it out. Your niece found it. Megan's internship at the credit union downtown gave her some insights. This account was opened 18 months ago. Regular deposits, always just under $10,000, just under the federal reporting threshold. Classic sign of hiding money. Your niece, Megan, found it. Her internship at the credit union downtown gave her a heads up. This account was opened 18 months ago, with regular deposits just under $10,000, the federal reporting threshold. A classic sign of someone trying to hide money. Blake slid over another document. The deposits align perfectly with your long-haul schedule. When you're gone, money goes in. Blake slid another document across the table. The deposits line up with your long-haul schedule. When you were on the road, money was being deposited. I sat back in the chair. She's been planning this for over a year. I leaned back in the chair. She's been planning this for more than a year. I don't think she was planning to leave you, Cameron. I think she was preparing in case you left her. I don't think she was planning on leaving you, Cameron. I think she was preparing in case you left her. Why would I leave her? I was working myself to death to provide for us. Why would I leave her? I was working myself to the bone to provide for us. That's when Blake slid over another piece of paper, a credit card statement with a hotel charge from Minneapolis dated 3 months ago. Then Blake slid another document to me, a credit card statement with a hotel charge from Minneapolis from 3 months ago. I'd been in Seattle that week. I was in Seattle that week. The name on the reservation, Harold Jensen. The name on the reservation was Harold Jensen. Harold? I thought. Harold, our neighbor? The one who texted me about the guy at our house? Harold, my neighbor? The one who texted me to tell me a man was at my house? Blake's face was grim. We think Harold has been involved with Dana for some time. He was creating a false trail to make you suspicious while they were together. The betrayal wasn't just Dana, Cameron, it was coordinated. Blake's face was serious. We believe Harold and Dana have been having an affair for some time. He was setting you up to make you suspicious while they were together. It wasn't just Dana's betrayal, Cameron, they planned it together. The phone on the other end suddenly went silent when the full scope of their deception hit me. The person on the other end of the phone suddenly became quiet as the extent of their deception dawned on me. Harold playing the concerned neighbor while sleeping with my wife. Harold acting like a concerned neighbor while he was sleeping with my wife. Dana draining our accounts while I was fighting for my life. Dana emptying our accounts while I was fighting for my life. It was all planned, calculated, cold-blooded. It was all a cold, calculated plan. I stood up, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. What's our next move? I stood up, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. What's our next step? Blake smiled for the first time that day. That's up to you, but if I were in your shoes, I'd make sure they both regret ever thinking they could get away with this. Blake smiled for the first time all day. That's up to you, but if I were you, I'd make sure they both regret thinking they could get away with this. I spent the next month at Jeff's, letting Blake build our case while I recovered. I stayed at Jeff's for the next month, allowing Blake to build our case while I recovered. We had a strategy now. Document everything, gather evidence of Dana and Harold's relationship, prove the financial deception that went back over a year. We had a plan. Document everything, get evidence of Dana and Harold's relationship, and prove that the financial deception had been going on for over a year. Megan was invaluable. Megan was a great help. Her position at the credit union gave us insights into financial patterns we wouldn't have seen otherwise. Her job at the credit union gave us information about their financial habits that we wouldn't have otherwise found. Nothing illegal, she told me one evening. Just connecting dots that were already in plain sight. The account has another person with access. It's nothing illegal, she told me one night. I'm just connecting the dots. The account has another person with access to it. Not a joint owner, but an authorized user. They're not a joint owner, but they're an authorized user. Harold, I guessed. Harold, I said. She nodded. And there's something else. They've started moving money, smaller amounts to different accounts. They know we're on to them. She nodded. And there's something else. They've started moving smaller amounts of money to different accounts. They know we're on to them. I stared out the window. They're liquidating. Getting ready to run. I looked out the window. They're getting their money out. They're about to run. That night, I called Blake. We need to move faster. I called Blake that night. We have to move quickly. I agree, but we need to be careful. If we tip our hand too soon, they'll disappear with everything. I agree, but we have to be careful. If we act too quickly, they'll leave with all the money. So what do we do? Blake was quiet for a moment. We need leverage. Something that makes them think twice about running. Blake was quiet for a moment. We need leverage. Something to make them reconsider running. However, she had no idea that I was 3 steps ahead of her entire plan. She had no idea that I was already 3 steps ahead of her. The next day, I drove to our house when I knew Dana would be at work. The next day, I drove to our house when I knew Dana would be at work. I didn't go inside. Instead, I walked the property line, taking photos with my phone. And took photos with my phone. The new shed Harold had helped build last summer. The fancy landscaping that had mysteriously appeared while I was on a 3-week haul to California. The new landscaping that mysteriously appeared while I was on a 3-week trip to California. Improvements paid for with my money, likely installed by Harold, increasing the value of the property that was now solely in my name. The upgrades were paid for with my money, probably installed by Harold, which increased the value of the property that was now in my name. I sent the photos to Blake with a simple message. Documented. 2 days later, Dana's lawyer called Blake with an offer that told me everything I needed to know about their desperation. 2 days later, Dana's lawyer called Blake with an offer that told me how desperate they were. Dana will return 50% of the withdrawn funds in exchange for 50% equity in the house, Blake told me. Dana will give back half of the money she took if you give her 50% of the house's value, Blake told me. They're testing us, I said. seeing if we'll settle cheap. What do we tell them? They're testing us to see if we'll settle for less. What do we tell them? I asked. Nothing yet. Let them sweat. Nothing yet. Let them worry. Meanwhile, I made another move they'd never see coming. In the meantime, I made another move they wouldn't expect. I contacted my trucking company's HR department, explained my situation, and asked about the disability insurance I'd been paying into for 20 years. I called my trucking company's HR department, explained my situation, and asked about the disability insurance I had been paying for 20 years. You're entitled to 60% of your salary for up to 12 months, the representative explained. Given your cardiac event and doctor's restrictions, you easily qualify. You're entitled to 60% of your salary for up to 12 months, the representative said. Given your cardiac event and doctor's orders, you easily qualify. I filed the paperwork that day. Another source of income Dana didn't know about wouldn't be included in any settlement discussions. It was another source of income Dana didn't know about and wouldn't be included in any settlement discussions. The next week, Jeff drove me past our house again. The following week, Jeff drove me by the house again. This time, I noticed something that made my heart race with anticipation. A "for sale" sign on Harold's lawn. This time, I saw something that made my heart race with excitement. A "for sale" sign on Harold's front lawn. He's cutting and running, Jeff said. He's getting out of here, Jeff said. I nodded and called Megan immediately. I nodded and called Megan right away. An hour later, Megan confirmed our suspicion. Harold had cleared out his accounts 2 days earlier, nearly $90,000 withdrawn in cashier's checks. An hour later, Megan confirmed our suspicion. Harold had emptied his accounts 2 days earlier, withdrawing nearly $90,000 in cashier's checks. I called Blake immediately. We need to act now. Harold's selling his house. Dana might be planning to go with him. I called Blake immediately. We have to act now. Harold's selling his house. Dana might be planning to leave with him. Blake didn't hesitate. I'll file for an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow, freezing all assets, preventing property sales without court approval. Blake didn't hesitate. I'll file for an emergency injunction tomorrow morning, freezing all assets and preventing the sale of any property without court approval. The next morning, I woke to a text from Dana. We need to talk. Just you and me. No lawyers. I woke up the next morning to a text from Dana. We need to talk. Just us, no lawyers. I showed it to Jeff. They're desperate, he said. I showed it to Jeff. They're desperate, he said. Good, I replied, forwarding the text to Blake. Good, I replied, and forwarded the text to Blake. Don't respond, Blake texted back. Injunction hearing is at 2 p.m. Don't respond, Blake texted back. The injunction hearing is at 2 p.m. At 1:30, I was walking into the courthouse when I spotted Dana and Harold together in the parking lot, arguing intensely. At 1:30, I was walking into the courthouse when I saw Dana and Harold in the parking lot arguing. They didn't see me. They didn't see me. I took out my phone and recorded them from a distance. I took out my phone and started recording them from a distance. 30 seconds of evidence showing their relationship, something they'd been careful to hide from all legal proceedings. I recorded 30 seconds of evidence showing their relationship, something they had tried to hide from the court. Inside, Blake was waiting. I showed him the video. Perfect timing, he said. Judge Harmon's already in a mood today. Blake was waiting for me inside. I showed him the video. Perfect timing, he said. Judge Harmon is already in a bad mood today. His smile suddenly vanished when he realized what we had on them. His smile disappeared when he saw what we had on them. Judge Harmon's chambers were smaller than the courtroom. Judge Harmon's office was smaller than the courtroom. Just the judge, the two lawyers, Dana, and me. It was just the judge, the two lawyers, Dana, and me. Harold wasn't allowed in. He wasn't party to the divorce. Harold wasn't allowed in because he wasn't part of the divorce. The video of them together played on the judge's computer. The video of them played on the judge's computer. No sound needed. Their body language said everything. You didn't need sound. Their body language said it all.
"Ms. Wells,"
Judge Harmon said when it finished,
"would you care to explain why your client has been declaring under oath that she has no relationship with this neighbor when video evidence clearly shows otherwise?" "Ms. Wells,"
Judge Harmon said when the video ended,
"can you explain why your client has been testifying under oath that she has no relationship with this neighbor when video evidence proves otherwise?"
Wells looked shaken.
"Your Honor, the nature of their relationship isn't relevant to the financial matters at hand."
Wells looked shocked.
"Your Honor, their relationship is not relevant to the financial matters of this case. It is when financial fraud is being alleged, Counselor. It is relevant when financial fraud is being alleged, Counselor."
The judge turned to Dana, whose face had gone completely pale. The judge turned to Dana, whose face was pale.
"Mrs. Mitchell, are you planning to leave the state with Mr. Jensen? Mrs. Mitchell, are you planning to leave the state with Mr. Jensen?" I don't,"
Dana stammered.
I'm not,"
Dana stammered.
"Let me rephrase,"
the judge continued.
"The court has evidence that you and Mr. Jensen have been moving substantial sums of money, that Mr. Jensen is selling his property, and that you withdrew funds from joint accounts while your husband was incapacitated. This suggests a pattern of deception and intent to flee. Let me rephrase,"
the judge continued.
"The court has evidence that you and Mr. Jensen have been moving large amounts of money, that he is selling his property, and that you withdrew money from a joint account while your husband was incapacitated. This shows a pattern of deception and an intention to flee."
He looked at both lawyers.
"I'm issuing an immediate freeze on all assets belonging to both Dana Mitchell and Harold Jensen. Neither may leave the county without court permission."
He looked at both lawyers and said,
"I'm issuing an immediate freeze on all assets belonging to both Dana Mitchell and Harold Jensen. Neither of them can leave the county without court permission."
Dana made a small choke sound. Dana made a small choking sound.
"Additionally,"
he turned to me,
"given Mr. Mitchell's medical condition and the evidence of financial exploitation during his incapacity, I'm granting temporary exclusive use of the marital home to Mr. Mitchell. Additionally,"
he said, turning to me,
"given Mr. Mitchell's medical condition and the evidence of financial exploitation during his time in the hospital, I'm granting him temporary exclusive use of the marital home." "Your Honor,"
Wells began.
"Your Honor,"
Wells started to say, but the judge held up his hand.
"The exploitation of a medically vulnerable spouse is something this court takes very seriously, Counselor. You're lucky I'm not recommending criminal charges at this time."
But the judge held up his hand.
"This court takes the exploitation of a medically vulnerable spouse very seriously, Counselor. You're lucky I'm not recommending criminal charges right now."
The panic in her eyes was unmistakable as Dana realized her entire plan had crumbled. The panic in her eyes was clear as Dana realized her whole plan had fallen apart. As we left the courtroom, Dana caught my eye for the first time in months. As we were leaving the courtroom, Dana looked at me for the first time in months. What I saw there wasn't anger or defiance. It was pure, undiluted fear, not of me, but of the consequences of her actions finally catching up with her. What I saw was not anger or defiance, but pure, unadulterated fear, not of me, but of the consequences of her actions finally catching up with her. 3 months after that day in the hospital, I moved back into my house. 3 months after being in the hospital, I moved back into my house. The divorce was finalized faster than anyone expected. The divorce was finalized sooner than anyone expected. Dana didn't fight it after the injunction hearing. Dana didn't fight the divorce after the injunction hearing. Harold had disappeared, leaving her to face everything alone. Harold disappeared, and she was left to face the consequences alone. In the end, Judge Harmon awarded me the house, my truck, and 80% of our combined savings. In the end, Judge Harmon awarded me the house, my truck, and 80% of our savings. Dana got her car and the remaining 20%. Dana got her car and the remaining 20% of the money. The secret account she'd been building for 18 months was split 50-50, but only after she paid my legal fees from her share. The secret account she'd been building for 18 months was split evenly, but only after she paid my legal fees from her half. I never spoke to her directly again. We never spoke to each other again. Everything went through lawyers. All our communication was through our lawyers. The last I heard, she'd moved to Minneapolis, starting over, I guess, probably still wondering how everything went so wrong so fast. The last I heard was that she had moved to Minneapolis to start over, probably still wondering how everything went wrong so quickly. I sold the house 6 months later. Too many memories, too much betrayal soaked into those walls. I sold the house 6 months later because it had too many bad memories, and too much betrayal in those walls. Bought a smaller place closer to Jeff and Megan. I bought a smaller house closer to Jeff and Megan. Used some of the money to help Megan finish law school. I used some of the money to help Megan finish law school. She's going to make one hell of an attorney someday. She's going to be a great lawyer someday. I don't drive long haul anymore. I no longer drive long haul trucks. My heart can't take the stress, doctor says. The doctor says my heart can't handle the stress. Found work dispatching instead. I found a job as a dispatcher instead. Home every night. Steady hours, decent pay. I'm home every night with a steady job and good pay. It's quieter than the open road, but there's something to be said for stability, for knowing where you'll sleep each night and who you can trust. It's quieter than being on the road, but there's something to be said for stability and knowing where you'll sleep each night and who you can trust. Sometimes people ask if I'm angry about what happened. Sometimes people ask me if I'm angry about what happened. I'm not. I'm not. Not anymore. Not anymore. You can't control what others do to you, only how you respond. You can't control what people do to you, but you can control how you react. Dana thought she was taking everything from me that day in the hospital when I was unconscious and helpless. Dana thought she was taking everything from me that day in the hospital when I was unconscious and helpless. Instead, she forced me to fight for myself in a way I never had before. Instead, she forced me to fight for myself in a way I had never had to before. She showed me exactly who she really was, and gave me the motivation to show her exactly who I could be when pushed too far. She revealed her true self to me, and gave me the motivation to show her who I could be when pushed to my limits. Last week, I was cleaning out some old boxes and found our wedding album. Last week, while cleaning out some boxes, I found our wedding album. Thought about throwing it away but didn't. I thought about throwing it away, but I didn't. Just put it back in the box. I just put it back in the box. It's part of my story now. It's a part of my story now. Not the end, just a chapter. It's not the end, just a chapter. One I had to close before I could write the next one. A chapter one had to close so I could start the next one. The heart attack nearly killed me. The betrayal nearly broke me. The heart attack almost killed me. The betrayal almost broke me. But I'm still here. But I'm still here. Changed, definitely. I'm definitely changed. Stronger, absolutely. I'm absolutely stronger. Sometimes karma needs a little help, and sometimes the life you rebuild from the ashes is better than the one that burned down. Sometimes karma needs a little push, and sometimes the life you rebuild from the wreckage is better than the one that was destroyed.